Good evening everyone and welcome to an Oz Cyclone Chasers Cyclone video update for the Australian region. Tonight, March the 3rd, 2014. My name's Chris Nitzo and tonight we'll be talking mostly once again about the Queensland tropical low. So firstly, before we do that, we do have a very weak, what could be described as a monsoon trough up here in the far northern parts or part north of the continent itself. We have what is also a extremely weakish low out here just to the west of the northwestern coast of the top end, and it's really not doing anything. Conditions are not conducive for its development anytime soon, but it is there and it's expected actually to be there for a while longer. So therefore we are looking at this particular situation or this particular region as it drifts very slowly to the west. Maybe in a week to 2 weeks time there is just the potential for some development of that particular system. The Bureau of Meteorology is giving it a 5 to 20% chance of forming into a cyclone in the 2 to 3 day mark, but really that would be closer to the 5 rather than the 20 in terms of percentages for this particular system. And look, it's not expected to do anything anytime quickly, so really our hands are full with the Queensland system, and they will be full with the Queensland system for the next few days. So we're only going to briefly cover the WA one because it's not going to develop anytime soon. Alright, as we head further to the east, we can see that trough system remains in place over inland Australia. We can see some really nice convection again developing over the inland parts of the Northern Territory. And we can see over to the Coral Sea an increase in convection associated with the monsoon here. The monsoon trough is much sharper, much more defined here in the far northern Coral Sea. And in there somewhere is a weakish low, but it keeps getting sheared away to the west, and so what you get is these thunderstorms, or are these thunderstorms that pop up and then get sheared away to the west. So it's not developing anytime soon, but in the future that wind shear will decrease as the system pushes in a more southerly, southwesterly direction. That wind shear will decrease and the system will develop. Thanks to Weather Zone for the synoptic chart here. You can see the low that I was speaking about in the Coral Sea out here to the southwest of the Solomons, and you can also see that very weak low to the west of the top end coast. Once again, that one expected to move very slowly to the west and not expected to develop in the next 5 to 7 days, but after that it may do so. In the Tasman, we've got a fairly strong high, and that strong high is pushing fairly strong winds up the Queensland coast, and eventually those strong winds will converge with winds coming from the northwest. Now they will seek to develop this system further as it tracks southwest. The pressure gradient will tighten up in the future as well, so these winds will further increase along the Queensland coast as this high remains in place in the Tasman and the low starts to push southwards, and so we start to get a much stronger pressure squeeze between the high and the low. And also don't forget that the low develops as well, so that low pressure will actually drop further. So once again we have a tighter pressure gradient, so therefore we're going to see stronger winds in the Coral Sea. We're going to see some really nice surf conditions developing over southeast Queensland as well as that system tracks southwards. Well, the Coral Sea low has been giving a moderate chance, which is 20 to 50% chance of forming by Thursday. Now this low keeps getting pegged back and back because it's showing no structure and it's under continual vertical wind shear, and so it's finding it very difficult to get itself together, get some centralized convection happening, and because of that the Bureau keeps pushing the potential back by a day every day. So at this stage we're looking probably more likely Thursday, maybe actually Friday is looking more likely for the system to actually form into a TC according to most of the guidance. Now most of the guidance also keeps this system offshore, and let's take a look at that guidance now. So firstly, if we take a look at the short-term Bureau Access Regional Model, we can see the low here around 1:55, around 10 or 11 south tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. Queensland time. Sorry, 4 a.m. Queensland time. And then we have a look at 4 p.m. We see the system just drifts. It doesn't really move. It sort of just drifts to the west or west-southwest. Then as we head to 4 a.m. on Wednesday, the system continues drifting in a westerly direction. And then as we head to 4 p.m. Wednesday, we start to see the system dipping more to the south or southwest as it develops a little bit more height. You can see here the pressure starting to drop in the system, and as it's developing height, and we can see then the track as this system continues on Thursday morning, continues to push southwest, and then Thursday afternoon continues to push in that southwesterly direction while slowly deepening. So it's very close to a tropical cyclone there, according to the Access regional model from the Bureau of Meteorology by Thursday evening, as it lies basically directly east of Cape Melville to Cooktown region. But it is pushing at that point in time in a southwesterly direction. Now let's have a look at the upper level steering flow at that time. So by that stage, the system should be sufficiently deep enough to be steered by the approximately the 500 hectopascal level. And what we can see here when we look at that level, that's about 5 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. And what we can see using that is we can see that overall we have some fairly strong northerly winds in the upper levels, or even northwesterly winds in the upper levels, and they're going to seek to want to push the system in a southerly direction. We have a bit of a competing influence here coming in off the ridging from southern Australia, and we have this southeasterly wind pushing the other way. So overall the system won't track following these winds here, so it won't track south-southeast at that point in time. It's likely to vector direction, which is the overall direction once these two influences battle it out. It's likely to be quite slow moving at that point in time, and likely to be moving more in that direction there, or south-southwest direction. But overall, most of the model guidance suggests that's about as close as it's going to get to the Queensland coast, maybe just a little bit further to the west, and then on about Friday or Saturday, more likely Saturday, it'll start to adopt a more south to southeast track in response to different upper level winds, or a changing upper level pattern. I guess the key is how far west can we get this thing to move, and you know, if we can get it to move another 2 or 3 degrees west of 150, we're going to see really big rainfalls along the coastline. We're going to see the system approaching the coast, which is going to be enough to create a lot of rain and a lot of wind for the area. But if it remains around that 150 line, we're not going to see that intense rainfall. We're just going to see onshore showers, and obviously if it remains further east of that, and that's what some of the other guidance is suggesting, we're going to see minimal effects on the coast. But really at this point in time, it's a matter of how close to the coast we can get it. There is still the outside chance, and some of the guidance is still suggesting it, there is still the outside chance that this thing will push in a little bit more of a southwesterly track and possibly make landfall south of Cairns through to the Mackay region. There is still that opportunity for the system, but that really the percentages on that is down, because most of the guidance suggests that the system remains offshore. And so really what we're hoping for, and fingers crossed here, is that it pushes a little bit further to the west than what it shows here, and is able to dump a lot of rain on the central Queensland coast, possibly even the Herbert-Burdekin coast. So if we take a look at Wednesday morning on the European, we can see it here. The low pressure system is way out here to the northeast, and as we head to Thursday morning, we can see the system tracks in a southwesterly direction, so still fairly good agreement as to where it's going to track for the first 3 or 4 days. And then what happens is around about Friday things go a little bit pear-shaped, and the guidance then diverges quite drastically and dramatically. But here we have on Friday morning a system here which is starting to produce gales on its northwestern quadrant, and also some gales far removed to the southwest. Then as we head to Friday night, we're going to see the system continuing to push in a southwest direction still, but what happens on the weekend is that southwesterly direction starts to halt, and so what we actually get after that is a very, very slow moving system, as it has competing influence, or competing steering influences, from the north pushing it to the south, and from the east pushing it to the west. And so those steering influences battle it out here, and the system remains quite slow moving through Saturday. And then into Saturday night, we see the system starting to push in a more south-southeast direction parallel to the coast. Still not really a classical tropical cyclone based on that wind pattern. As you can see here, the gales are a long way away from the centre, so a little bit of a raggedy looking Dylan type thing on the cards there, and we were hoping that that wasn't going to be the case. As we head to Sunday morning, we see that the system probably makes its closest approach to the coastline here, well off the coast of Bowen. We're talking probably about 200 or 300 kilometres off the coast of Bowen, according to the European. And so once again, if we look at the biggest issue here is the amount of rain falling from the system. You can see that all the heavy rain remains offshore because the system is just that little bit too far off the coast. Really, if we could get it another 100 k's in, you could get some of that heavy rain pushing onto the coast. The good thing about it is that that rain continues fairly well, a long way south of the system. So you can see here even Rocky and Gladstone copping a little bit from it, even though it's positioned basically east of Townsville. So you can see there that the rain will extend a long way to the south, but once again, it's all dependent on exactly how far it moves or how close to the coast it moves. You can see here producing some really nice gales to the south, and once again though, as we head to Sunday night, most of the rain remaining just offshore. You can see here some really heavy rain remaining offshore, some moderate rain getting into the Mackay area, and a feeder band into the Rocky area, but overall most of the heavy rain remains offshore. So look, that's a lot more positive than last night what the Euro was showing us, where it was pushing the system a long way further to the this morning it was pushing the system a long way further to the east. So if I compare that to what it was showing us the other day, this morning, you can see the system a long way further to the east. Now if it happens that this comes true, you're not going to see any rain on the coast whatsoever, probably just maybe the most isolated of isolated showers pushing onto the coast, because on the coast here you've got a very dry southerly airstream. So that's the European model. Let's have a look at the GFS model, which shows a slightly different scenario. So out to 2 days it's really doing nothing there, and as we head to 3 days it doesn't tighten up all that much, and it sort of remains a fairly troughy feature here across the northern Coral Sea. As we head to day 4 with the GFS, we see the system does tighten up a little bit. It does start to produce gales to its north and continues to push in a west-southwesterly direction. So there is a fundamental difference there over the first 4 days. The GFS model pushes it a lot further to the west before it forms it and really develops it. So by Saturday morning, it basically lies directly north of about Bowen, directly east of about Cooktown. If we compare that to the way the European was suggesting it would lie at that same time, the Euro was just that little bit further to the east. Now, you mightn't think that that's much of a difference, and it's not out to 5 days, but it makes a world of difference to the final scenario, because if you look at what happens with the GFS over the next couple of days, on the Saturday night, the system continues to push or track in a southerly direction. Now you can see here, if it continues to track in a southerly direction, it's beelining towards the coast, whereas that couple of 100k difference in the Euro is making it beeline off the coast. So it's not actually going towards any part of the coast, it's going to remain offshore. So that couple of 100k's, folks, makes all the difference in this particular system. And if we just track it just to have a look as to what happens there on the Sunday, we see the system approaching the Queensland coast as a high-end Category 1 or Category 2, and eventually this particular model run had it making landfall right around the Townsville to Bowen coastline. So really it's a huge difference, and it's only a couple of 100k's, but the outcome becomes hugely varied just on that couple of 100k's in the first 4 or 5 days. So once again, we talked about this the other night, about the steering mechanisms for this particular system, and we said that really it's an upper level high that's located over the eastern Coral Sea, Vanuatu region, and then an amplifying upper level trough over inland Queensland that are combining to push this system in this direction. And really the orientation of that upper level high is going to make things very interesting in terms of exactly how far south-southwest the system pushes before it pushes out more to the southeast. And so you can see here that according to the GFS model, we have the orientation of the upper level high is a lot further to the west than in the European. So once again, that's making all the difference in pushing the tropical low or tropical cyclone at that stage closer to the Queensland coast than the European. So if I show you the European orientation of that upper high and the upper trough, you can see in the European that the upper high is nowhere near as strong. It has a limited influence on the movement of the system, and we see that the upper trough is actually a lot stronger in the Euro, and so those factors combine to push the system a little bit further away from, or keep the system a little bit further away from the coast. Now, we've had a look at in-depth at the Euro and the GFS. Let's have a quick look at the ensemble guidance. So this is a whole bunch of Euros and a whole bunch of GFSs, and let's have a look at what they're suggesting will happen. So firstly, we'll take a look at the European. Out to day 4 on the Friday morning, we can see that overall the ensemble expects the low to be here, but with a particular focus here on the southwestern edge of that 1008 hectopascal isobar. You can see here is the most favoured, I guess, region for that low to remain on day 4. On day 5, we see quite a big spread in guidance on the European, where the system could lie very close to the coast of Cairns, all the way out through to the far eastern Coral Sea. But once again, the most favoured area for the tropical low at that point in time remains in the northern or central Coral Sea, right in here. So that's the most favoured area. But once again, the variance on that is quite large. That's as we head to Saturday. Now remember, that's because not quite sure when that upper level trough steering influence will kick in and start to push the system away from the coast. The other thing we're not sure of is just how far west the system can push in the next 4 days, which could make all the difference, as we showed you in the GFS. So as we head to day 6 here, we can see that overall we have the variance again. Overall, the system should be located here, but there is still a fairly high variance, particularly closer to the coastline of where the system could lie. And similarly, there's also, believe it or not, quite a high variance here in the far eastern Coral Sea. So the European may start to be getting tricked up by day 6 as to multiple circulations along a trough line, and so that's going to make any sort of further forecast problematic. So that's as far as we're going to go with the Euro out to Sunday morning. So look, overall this is where it's expected to be, but it could be a lot closer to the coastline. So in the GFS ensemble, we can see overall we expect the low to be somewhere in there is the most favoured position, and that's at 4 days time. So that's on the Friday. Now as we track towards the Saturday, we see that the system is most likely going to move towards the south, but we also see that second area around the just to the east of that. So we see that the system could lie very close to the coast between Cairns and Townsville, and also it could, although, move a lot further to the east as well. So really the model is struggling already by Saturday as to which solution verifies. There's also that slight chance that still the GFS is keeping a low pressure region up here near Cape Melville or Princess Charlotte Bay. So it's still keeping that option open, whereas the other models have pretty well given up on that particular scenario. And then just out to day 6, if we continue tracking it, the system, according to the GFS, may have already made landfall between Townsville and Cairns. All could be located right along the coastline or east of the coastline. So folks, it's going to be touch and go as to how close we can go with this system and how close we can get it to the coast. If it can even cross the coast, there is still that slight possibility of that happening. But even if we can get it close to the coast, we can get some really decent rain here on the central coast, and with Sundays even further south as well, which would be a godsend for this area here of the Queensland coast, which hasn't had much rain at all. Unfortunately, the UK Met tells us that we're dreaming. The UK Met keeps the system well and truly offshore, develops it into quite an intense Category 2 or 3 tropical cyclone here on the 9th of March, but keeps it well and truly offshore, and because of that sort of track in the UK Met, we would not expect the system to be creating any type of rainfall on the Queensland coast. That is upwards of 400 or so kilometres off the coast there, so it's not going to do too much in terms of rainfall for the coast. It's going to circulate a lot of dry air in through the northern Queensland. So unfortunately, if the UK Met verifies, it's going to be a pretty boring cyclone for us all. The reason I show you the UK Met though, and I put a little bit of faith in it, is because this is #2 model in the world in terms of accuracy. So, and the Euro has been struggling lately, and the UK Met has been a lot more steady with its predictions, only basically moving them a couple of 100 k's to the west or a couple of 100 k's to the east. So that's why I think we probably need to pay a little bit of attention to the UK Met simulation here. Obviously the cyclone chaser in me wants this to be completely wrong. So tomorrow we're going to see a continuation of that shower and storm activity over the Northern Territory. Some isolated showers and storms continuing in that band of cloud and drizzle along the western part of, or the far western parts of Queensland and also parts of the Territory. The Northern Peninsula looks like a very active period for them. As I said, the monsoon trough out here in the Coral Sea is going off, and there is some convergence to the south of that, so some pretty high rainfall totals possible on the far northeastern peninsula coastline. On Wednesday, we continue to see shower and storm activity through NT in that quasi-stationary, very, very weak low pressure region, and we start to see the Coral Sea madness pushing to the west. And then on the Thursday, or pushing to the southwest I should say, on Thursday that Coral Sea stuff continues to fire. Over the NT we could actually start to see some shower and storm activity hitting Darwin again, and the western top end coastline. And on the Friday we see that Coral Sea stuff pushing to the southwest or south, with still some of the models predicting a westerly or a far northerly impact of a weaker low, and so if that happens, that's why you're seeing some of the heavier rainfall totals pushing onto Cape Melville or Cooktown region. But overall, that's not the expected scenario. The expected scenario is for the system to remain offshore. So the next 4 days we're going to see good rain over NT, some decent shower and storm activity over the far western parts of Queensland, some good rain over the far northern Cape York Peninsula in that monsoonal convergence, and also that Coral Sea region is firing up with a lot of rain. In the 4 days after that, bear in mind this is very, very preliminary, and once again, don't pay too much attention to rainfall totals here, because they're going to change and shift dramatically depending on where the system pushes and where the system moves in the Coral Sea. So all of this stuff here over Queensland, forget it. It may not, none of it may happen. So just please, we'll get to this later on when things get a little bit more certain. But over regardless of what happens there, we should still see some shower and storm activity over the peninsula coastline, the West Peninsula particularly, in a northwesterly flow, and also over the northern top end coastline. We are going to see an increase in rainfall as that tropical low in the 4 to 8 day period does start to actually resemble a real low and push towards the west. So we may actually see an increase in shower and storm activity there, and also an increase in shower and storm activity near the Kimberley coastline is expected, and possibly even just some isolated stuff developing in the Pilbara finally. It's been very dry there the past few weeks. Alright folks, thanks for watching tonight. We'll talk again on the 4th of March. So at this stage, the most favoured scenario for the Coral Sea low is for it to become a cyclone and track south just off the coast of Queensland. How far off the coast? Ooh, that's the million-dollar question, and we're hoping it tracks right on the coast or very, very close to the coast. But at this stage, most of the guidance keeps it a few 100 k's off the coast. So fingers crossed the guidance changes and we see some decent rain over central parts of Queensland because of it. Good night.